The great assembly hall of the Galactic Confederation stretched across 17 kilometers of polished obsidian floors, its crystalline dome reaching into the artificial atmosphere of Station Nexus Prime. Representatives from 4,000 species filled the vast amphitheater, their varied forms creating a tapestry of evolution's infinite creativity. Tentacled Zephyrians floated in their biomechanical suits, silicon-based crystallites pulsed with internal light, and the hive-minded collective drones moved in perfect synchronization. At the center of this cosmic gathering sat humanity's delegation, a mere 12 individuals in simple dark suits that seemed almost primitive compared to the advanced biomodifications and technological enhancements surrounding them. Ambassador Elena Vasquez maintained perfect composure as Speaker Zeth Kalar of the Hegemony Council droned on about territorial redistribution protocols, her dark eyes scanning the assembly with calculated patience. The Hegemony had called this emergency session after discovering humanity's rapid expansion into what they termed contested space sectors. 36 worlds that humans had quietly colonized over the past century were now being claimed by various alien governments under ancient territorial agreements that predated Earth's admission to the Confederation by millennia. The species designated as humans must understand, Zeth Kalar's translated voice echoed through bioneural implants, that their unauthorized settlements violate the sacred accords of Veltar. These worlds belong to the rightful claimants who have held ancestral rights for over 10,000 standard cycles. Ambassador Vasquez rose slowly, her movement causing a ripple of attention throughout the massive hall. When humans stood, they commanded attention in ways that still unsettled many species. Something about their bipedal stance, the way they held themselves, triggered deep evolutionary memories in creatures that had once been prey. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly without technological amplification. "Humanity appreciates the Council's concerns. However, we must clarify certain misconceptions about our expansion activities." The Veltari Supreme Chancellor, a being resembling a cross between an octopus and a tree, rustled his photosynthetic fronds dismissively. "There are no misconceptions. Human. Your species discovered faster than light travel barely 2 centuries ago. These worlds have been surveyed and claimed by civilizations that achieved interstellar flight while your ancestors were still developing agriculture. Your presence on them is illegitimate." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. The human delegation remained perfectly still, their faces expressionless. This unanimous response seemed to satisfy the assembled representatives, most of whom viewed humanity as an upstart species that needed to learn its place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Furthermore," added diplomatic Prime Shulith of the Trade Consortium, her insectoid mandibles clicking with agitation, "humanity's industrial activities on these worlds have disrupted established trade routes and resource extraction agreements. The economic damage alone justifies immediate evacuation orders." Ambassador Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And what compensation does the Council propose for the infrastructure humanity has established on these worlds? The cities we've built, the atmospheric processors, the terraforming projects that have taken decades to complete." Speaker Zeth Kalar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Compensation? These improvements were made illegally on sovereign territory. Under Confederation law, illegal settlements and their improvements become property of the rightful claimants. Humanity will receive nothing." The temperature in the hall seemed to drop several degrees. Ambassador Vasquez exchanged a brief glance with her security chief, Colonel Marcus Chen, whose hand rested casually near the diplomatic case at his side. The movement was barely perceptible, but every human in the delegation noted it. "I want to ensure I understand the Council's position clearly," Vasquez said, her voice maintaining its diplomatic tone. Humanity is to abandon 37 fully developed worlds, home to over 2 billion human colonists, along with all infrastructure worth approximately 14 trillion standard credits, and receive no compensation whatsoever. Is that correct? Precisely, confirmed Supreme Chancellor Veltar. And this evacuation must be completed within 1 standard year, as is traditional for illegal settlement remediation. The human delegation sat in perfect silence for exactly 60 seconds. Around the hall, representatives began to fidget. Humans had a reputation for being reasonable, almost submissive in diplomatic negotiations. Their silence was unusual and somehow unsettling. When Ambassador Vasquez spoke again, her voice carried a different quality. Still diplomatic, still polite, but with an undertone that made several empathic species uncomfortable. 1 year, she repeated, to evacuate 2 billion people and abandon infrastructure that took a century to build. And we receive nothing in return except the privilege of continued membership in this confederation. That is generous, snapped Diplomatic Prime Shuleth. Many species would simply order immediate military evacuation. The Council shows remarkable restraint in allowing a full year. Ambassador Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant expression, though none of the assembled aliens quite understood why. The Council's generosity is noted and appreciated. She activated her personal communicator, speaking in rapid English that the translation matrices struggled to process effectively. The words came through garbled and incomplete, but several phrases were clear enough. Prometheus Protocol, full authorization, and executive override confirmed. Around the hall, the more militarily minded species began to pay closer attention. Protocol names usually indicated some form of prepared response, and humans were notorious for their contingency planning. I'm afraid, Ambassador Vasquez continued, closing her communicator, that humanity must respectfully decline the Council's generous offer. The hall erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, translation matrices struggling to keep pace with dozens of languages expressing outrage simultaneously. Speaker Zeth Kalar hammered his ceremonial staff against the resonance chamber, calling for order. Decline? He demanded when quiet finally returned. This is not a negotiation, human. This is a ruling of the Confederation Council. You have no choice but to comply. Actually, Ambassador Vasquez replied, reaching into her briefcase, we do have a choice. Humanity chooses to withdraw from the Galactic Confederation, effective immediately. She produced a data pad containing humanity's formal withdrawal notice and placed it on the speaker's podium. The simple gesture sent shockwaves through the assembly. No species had ever voluntarily withdrawn from the Confederation. The benefits of membership trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, shared technology were too valuable to abandon. This is preposterous, sputtered Supreme Chancellor Veltar. Your species depends on Confederation technology, on our trade networks, on our protection from hostile forces beyond known space. Without us, humanity will stagnate and eventually face extinction. Ambassador Vasquez's smile widened. That's an interesting assumption, Chancellor. However, humanity has always been remarkably adaptable. We'll manage. The silence that followed was profound. 4,000 species represented in the hall, many of them ancient civilizations with billions of years of combined history, and none of them had ever encountered a species willing to walk away from galactic civilization itself. You're bluffing, declared War Leader Krextal of the Hegemony's military arm, his massive frame casting shadows across nearby delegates. No rational species would choose isolation over integration. This is merely a negotiating tactic. Colonel Chen finally spoke, his voice carrying the clipped precision of a career military officer. War Leader, with respect, you fundamentally misunderstand human nature. When we feel we're being treated unfairly, our typical response isn't to negotiate harder. It's to walk away and find our own path. But that's began Diplomatic Prime Julith, her mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "That's completely irrational. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Countless hostile species exist beyond Confederation protection. Ancient war machines still patrol dead systems. Cosmic phenomena that can destroy entire star systems. Your species would be completely vulnerable." Ambassador Vasquez gathered her materials with practiced efficiency. "Perhaps, but that will be humanity's problem to solve, not the Confederation's. We thank the Council for the centuries of cooperation and wish you all well in your future endeavors." As the human delegation prepared to leave, War Leader Krextal stood to his full 3-meter height. "The hegemony will still require compliance with the territorial ruling. Withdrawal from the Confederation does not invalidate our ancestral claims." The humans paused at the chamber's massive doors. Ambassador Vasquez turned back one final time, and something in her expression caused several species to take unconscious steps backward. "War Leader," she said quietly, "I would respectfully suggest that attempting to enforce those claims against a non-member species might prove inadvisable." "Is that a threat?" Krextal demanded, his bio-enhanced muscles rippling with barely contained aggression. "No," Ambassador Vasquez replied. "It's free advice. The Confederation has rules of engagement, protocols for civilized conflict resolution. Humanity is about to operate outside those constraints." With that, the human delegation walked out, leaving behind 4,000 species in stunned silence. The massive doors closed with a resonance that seemed to echo through the artificial atmosphere for minutes afterward. In the aftermath, Diplomatic Prime Julith was the first to speak. "They can't be serious. This has to be an elaborate bluff." But Speaker Zethkalar, whose species had survived for millions of years by accurately reading the intentions of other beings, slowly shook his massive head. "I don't think they're bluffing, and I think we may have made a terrible mistake." Outside the station, the human diplomatic vessel, Terra's voice, detached from its docking port and began accelerating toward the edge of the system. Within its communication bay, quantum entanglement transmitters sent a single coded message across hundreds of light-years of space to Earth's solar command. "Prometheus Protocol is active. Humanity walks alone." 3 months after humanity's dramatic withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation, the first signs appeared that the cosmos had perhaps misjudged the species from Sol 3. The Hegemony Council had initially celebrated what they viewed as a primitive species tantrum, confident that economic pressure and isolation would force humanity back to the negotiating table within weeks. They were catastrophically wrong. The first indication came from the Veltari monitoring stations on the edge of contested space. Supreme Chancellor Veltar personally reviewed the sensor data 3 times before accepting its implications. Where human settlements had once maintained standard defensive arrays and civilian traffic patterns, massive industrial complexes now sprawled across entire continents. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Confederation databases. "This cannot be accurate," Veltar insisted to his chief science advisor, a crystalline being whose species had mastered quantum mechanics before Earth's sun had finished forming. "These readings suggest industrial capacity exceeding our most advanced manufacturing worlds." Science Prime Kethrill's internal light pulsed in the patterns indicating extreme concern. "The data has been verified through 17 different sensor networks, Chancellor. Human industrial output on the contested worlds has increased by a factor of 15 in just 3 months. The rate of expansion defies known economic models." What the Confederation didn't understand was that humanity's seemingly modest technological development masked something far more dangerous, an entire species optimized for warfare and survival. For 2 centuries, humans had carefully maintained the appearance of being a peaceful, technology-dependent civilization while quietly preparing for the day they might need to stand alone. On New Terra, the largest of the contested worlds, Admiral Sarah Chen watched massive automated factories roll off the assembly lines at a rate that would have terrified any observer familiar with human history. These weren't the clean, efficient manufacturing centers common throughout Confederation space. They were war factories designed to operate in hostile environments and produce military equipment with ruthless efficiency. "Status report," Admiral Chen requested as she toured the primary weapons development facility, a sprawling complex that had been disguised as a terraforming station for the past 60 years. "All Prometheus facilities are now operating at full capacity," reported Director James Harrison, whose tired eyes reflected months of 20-hour workdays. "We're producing naval-class vessels at a rate of 12 per day across 17 shipyard systems. The new fusion torch drives are exceeding performance specifications by 30%. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "And the special projects?" Director Harrison's expression darkened. "The Einstein devices are ready for field testing. Psychological warfare protocols have been distributed to all naval commands. The Oppenheimer contingency is prepared but remains sealed pending direct authorization from Earth." These code names would have been meaningless to Confederation intelligence, but they represented humanity's darkest preparations. The Einstein devices were planet crackers, weapons capable of destabilizing a world's core through precisely targeted gravitational manipulation. The psychological warfare protocols drew from 2 centuries of human conflict, designed to break enemy morale through methods that civilized species would never consider. And the Oppenheimer contingency, that was humanity's final answer to extinction, a weapon system so terrible that even its creators hoped it would never be used. The Confederation's first real glimpse into humanity's true nature came when war leader Krextal decided to test the humans' resolve. A hegemony battle fleet, 200 vessels strong, moved to enforce the territorial claims on New Terra. It was a standard show of force, the kind that had worked countless times with other species who had overstepped their boundaries. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Terra system, expecting to face the modest defensive satellites and patrol craft typical of human settlements. Instead, they found themselves staring at a fortress. New Terra's moon had been hollowed out and converted into a massive weapons platform. The planet itself was surrounded by defensive installations that registered energy levels comparable to small stars. And between the moon and the planet, a human fleet waited. Captain HFY, commanding the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominance, studied the tactical display with growing unease. "Sensors confirm those readings. How many human vessels are we detecting?" "Sir, we're reading 374 ships of unknown configuration. Energy signatures suggest they're armed with weapons we can't identify." War leader Krextal activated the communication array, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had dominated this region of space for millennia. "Human vessels, you are in violation of hegemony territorial claims. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came from Admiral Sarah Chen aboard the human flagship Defiance. Her image appeared on the hegemony's main screen, and several officers instinctively stepped backward. There was something predatory in her expression, something that triggered ancient fears in species that had evolved beyond such primitive concerns. "War leader Krextal," Admiral Chen said pleasantly. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are in human space. Your presence here constitutes an act of war against the independent human coalition. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw before we respond appropriately." War leader Krextal's bio-enhanced physiology flushed with combat stimulants. "Respond appropriately? You face a fleet of the hegemony's finest warships. Your primitive weapons are no match for technology developed over millions of years." Admiral Chen's smile widened. "Would you like to test that assumption?" The war leader considered his options. The hegemony had never lost a fleet engagement in recorded history. Their ships were crewed by species bred for warfare, armed with weapons that could crack moons, protected by shields that had withstood the fury of ancient supernovae. A few dozen human ships, no matter how numerous, posed no real threat. "Open fire," he commanded. "Show these upstarts the price of defiance." The hegemony fleet unleashed a barrage that should have vaporized every human vessel in the system. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroid fields, particle beams that could cut through battleship armor like paper, quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously all converged on the human formation, and accomplished absolutely nothing. The human ships didn't dodge or attempt to intercept the incoming fire, they simply absorbed it. Energy that should have destroyed them was somehow redirected, absorbed, or simply ignored. The massive weapons that had conquered 100 worlds barely scorched the hulls of vessels that looked almost primitive compared to hegemony technology. "Impossible," Captain Rexvi whispered, staring at sensor readings that defied physics as the Confederation understood it. "Our weapons had no effect." Admiral Chen's voice came across the communication channel, still maintaining that terrifying, pleasant tone. "War leader, that was very impolite. Now it's our turn." The human fleet didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they did something that would haunt Confederation military doctrine for generations to come. They fired physics itself. The first human weapon to fire looked like a simple beam of light, but it cut through the hegemony flagship's shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The beam didn't explode or burn, it simply erased everything it touched, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole through 7 kilometers of the most advanced military technology in known space. The second weapon created a temporary black hole that lasted exactly 0.3 seconds, just long enough to crush 3 hegemony destroyers into singularities before safely evaporating. The third weapon was the most terrifying of all. It transmitted information directly into the hegemony crew's neural networks, overriding their biomechanical implants and forcing them to experience human memories of warfare. Soldiers who had never known fear suddenly relived the trenches of human world wars, the desperate struggles for survival that had defined humanity's evolution. The psychological impact was devastating. Within 10 minutes, the pride of the hegemony fleet was reduced to wreckage and retreating vessels. War leader Krextal's flagship limped away with minimal life support, its crew traumatized and broken. The engagement was recorded by automatic monitoring systems throughout the sector, and the data spread through Confederation networks within hours. For the first time in galactic history, a hegemony fleet had been defeated. Not outmaneuvered or forced to withdraw through clever tactics, but utterly destroyed by weapons that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of reality. Emergency sessions convened across Confederation space as military leaders tried to understand what they had witnessed. The human weapons were beyond their comprehension, operating on principles that their most advanced scientists couldn't explain. On Earth, President Amanda Foster reviewed the battle reports with a mixture of satisfaction and regret. The Prometheus Protocol had worked perfectly, but its activation meant that humanity was now committed to a path that could only end in total victory or complete extinction. "Any word from the Confederation?" she asked her security advisor, General Michael Rodriguez. "Complete silence, Madam President, but our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive fleet movements throughout their territory. It appears we have their attention." President Foster nodded grimly. "Phase 2 is authorized. It's time to show them what humanity is truly capable of." Across human space, dormant facilities that had been disguised as research stations or mining operations began revealing their true purpose. Weapons that had been developed in secret for 2 centuries, technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, defensive systems that could protect entire star systems, all came online simultaneously. The Confederation had made the fatal mistake of assuming that humanity's apparent technological dependence was real. In truth, humans had been preparing for this moment since first contact, developing weapons and strategies designed specifically for the day they might face the entire galaxy alone. And now, that day had arrived. 6 months after the Battle of New Terra, the Galactic Confederation existed in a state of barely controlled panic. What had begun as a simple territorial dispute had evolved into an existential crisis that threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. The humans hadn't just defeated a hegemony fleet, they had demonstrated capabilities that suggested every assumption about galactic power structures was fundamentally wrong. Speaker Zeth Kalar convened an emergency council session aboard the mobile fortress station Sovereign Will, surrounded by the combined fleets of 47 major species. The assembled military might represented the largest concentration of firepower in galactic history, enough to sterilize entire star systems. Yet the atmosphere in the command center was thick with fear. "Intelligence reports," Zeth Kalar demanded, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic displays showing human space. Where once there had been simple colonial settlements, vast industrial complexes now sprawled across hundreds of worlds. The energy signatures were beyond comprehension. War Commander Thexara of the crystalline hegemony, her silicon-based form pulsing with agitated light patterns, presented the data that had taken months to compile. Human expansion has accelerated beyond all mathematical models. They now control 1,400 star systems, each one heavily fortified with weapons we cannot identify. Our best estimates suggest they possess a fleet of over 2 million vessels. The number sent ripples of shock through the assembled commanders. 2 million ships represented more military power than the entire Confederation had accumulated in 10,000 years of expansion. "How is this possible?" demanded Admiral Velcris of the Aquatic Alliance, his translated voice bubbling with disbelief. 3 years ago, humanity had fewer than 10,000 vessels, most of them civilian transports and exploration craft. Supreme Science Advisor Quintal, whose species had mastered theoretical physics while Earth was still forming, projected a complex analysis that defied understanding. The humans appear to have been constructing military infrastructure for at least 2 centuries, disguised as civilian projects. Every research station was actually a weapons development facility. Every mining operation was a ship construction yard. Every terraforming project was a fortress in disguise. The scope of the deception was staggering. Humanity had fooled the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy for 200 years, maintaining the appearance of a peaceful, technology-dependent species while secretly building the largest war machine in galactic history. But the true terror was yet to come. Commander Zektar of Deep Space Reconnaissance presented sensor data that made the assembled leaders question the nature of reality itself. "Our long-range sensors have detected human vessels operating in regions that should be impossible to reach. They appear to be using faster-than-light travel that exceeds theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude." The implications were horrifying. If humans could travel faster than anything in the known galaxy, no Confederation world would be safe. They could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. "Furthermore," Commander Zektar continued, his voice trembling slightly, "we've detected human activity in the dead zone sectors of space that have been quarantined for millions of years due to ancient weapon systems and hostile entities that predate our oldest civilizations." This revelation sent the Council into chaos. The dead zones were regions where the galaxy's previous dominant civilizations had fought wars so destructive that space itself remained dangerous millions of years later. Ancient automated weapons still patrolled those systems, capable of destroying entire fleets. Cosmic anomalies created by weapons beyond current understanding made navigation impossible for any known technology. Yet humans were operating there with apparent impunity. What could they possibly want in the dead zones? Speaker Zeth Kalar asked. though he suspected the answer would be worse than the question. Science advisor Quintal's crystalline form dimmed with what could only be interpreted as fear. Archaeological evidence suggests the dead zones contain the remains of civilizations that achieved technological advancement beyond our current understanding. If humans are excavating those sites, the sentence hung unfinished because its completion was too terrible to voice. If humanity was recovering and reverse engineering technologies from civilizations that had been capable of destroying galaxies, then the current conflict wasn't just about territorial disputes. It was about the survival of every other species in known space. The Council's deliberations were interrupted by an urgent communication from the Confederation's border monitoring stations. The message was brief and devastating. Human fleets had simultaneously appeared in 47 different systems throughout Confederation space, not the contested border regions, but deep within established Confederation territory, near the homeworlds of major species. Speaker Zeth Kalar felt something he had never experienced in his 3-century lifespan: genuine terror. How many ships? Unknown, sir. They appeared instantaneously across sectors that are hundreds of light years apart. Current estimates suggest over 50,000 vessels, but they're using some form of stealth technology that makes accurate counts impossible. The tactical implications were beyond nightmare. Humanity had just demonstrated the ability to deploy massive fleets anywhere in the galaxy, bypassing every defensive system and early warning network that protected Confederation space. On the bridge of the human flagship Retribution, Admiral Elena Vasquez, the former ambassador who had walked out of the Confederation negotiations, watched her tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The psychological warfare protocols were working perfectly. The Confederation's military leaders were paralyzed by fear, unable to comprehend the scope of humanity's actual capabilities. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying than the aliens suspected. Humanity hadn't developed faster-than-light travel that exceeded theoretical limits. They had developed technology that operated outside the known laws of physics entirely. The secret lay in humanity's unique approach to scientific advancement. Where other species sought to understand and work within natural laws, humans had always sought to break those laws when they became inconvenient. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the communication station, "all fleet elements are in position. The Confederation Council is requesting immediate negotiations." Admiral Vasquez smiled. It was the same expression she had worn when walking out of the Confederation Assembly, but now it carried the weight of absolute military superiority. "Inform the Council that humanity is prepared to discuss terms, but these negotiations will be conducted under very different circumstances than our last meeting." The response came from Speaker Zeth Kalar himself, transmitted simultaneously to every human fleet position throughout Confederation space. His voice carried none of its former authority, instead reflecting the desperation of a species that had suddenly realized it was no longer the dominant power in its own galaxy. "Admiral Vasquez, the Confederation Council formally requests immediate ceasefire and diplomatic engagement. We may have misunderstood humanity's position regarding the territorial disputes." Admiral Vasquez activated the fleet-wide communication system, ensuring that every ship in Confederation space could receive her response. When she spoke, her words would be recorded and transmitted across the galaxy, marking the moment when the balance of cosmic power shifted forever. Speaker Zeth Kalar, "The Independent Human Coalition acknowledges your request for negotiations. However, the terms under discussion will be significantly different from your original proposal." She paused, allowing the weight of humanity's transformed position to settle across the galaxy. 47 species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia now waited for the demands of a species they had dismissed as primitive upstarts just months before. Humanity claims sovereignty over all star systems currently under human control, including the 37 worlds you previously demanded we evacuate. These territories are now permanently incorporated into the independent human coalition. Any attempt to challenge this claim will be considered an act of war. The silence that followed was profound. The Confederation had gone to war to force humanity off 37 worlds. Now they were being informed that humanity controlled over 1,400 systems and considered them all sovereign territory. Furthermore, Admiral Vasquez continued, humanity withdraws recognition of all Confederation territorial claims in the sectors bordering human space. We consider these regions to be neutral zones, open to colonization by any species capable of establishing sustainable settlements. This was a diplomatic earthquake. Humanity had just invalidated thousands of years of Confederation expansion and territorial agreements, declaring vast regions of space to be unclaimed territory available for resettlement. Finally, any Confederation military vessels found within 50 light-years of human territory will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. This exclusion zone is non-negotiable and will be enforced immediately. Admiral Vasquez ended the transmission and settled back in her command chair. Around the bridge, her officers maintained professional composure, but she could see the mixture of pride and apprehension in their expressions. Humanity had just dictated terms to the most powerful military alliance in galactic history. The question now was whether the galaxy would accept this new reality or choose to fight a war they couldn't win. The answer came within hours. Across Confederation space, military fleets began withdrawing from the borders of human territory. Ancient species that had never retreated from anything were abandoning strategic positions rather than risk confrontation with humanity's inexplicable weapons. On Earth, President Foster addressed the world's population with words that would echo through human history. Today, humanity stands alone among the stars, but we do not stand afraid. We have shown the galaxy that freedom cannot be taken from those willing to fight for it. The cosmos may observe us with terror, but that terror is born from respect for our strength, not hatred of our weakness. In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations recorded the birth of a new galactic superpower. Humanity had walked out of negotiations as a minor species seeking fairness. They had returned as conquerors who redefined the very concept of power in the galaxy. The cosmos would never be the same.